I have watched the NBA for a long time, and I'll tell you this, I've never seen a team as perplexing as this Miami Heat team. They had a similar roster as the year before when they were the 1 seed, but for basically the entire regular season this time, they were struggling. And despite finishing with a 44-38 record, they had a negative net rating. They were plagued with chemistry issues, a very lackadaisical offense, 25th in the NBA, plus a simple lack of talent and even a lack of effort. Despite all the talks of Heat culture, we didn't see it in the regular season. They were having a bad time. In this video, I want to take a look at how this Miami Heat team reached the NBA Finals. Why are they so good in the playoffs, and what are the differences between the regular season version of this team and the postseason version? What changes have they made? How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and without further ado, let's begin. Erik Spoelstra was named to the NBA's top 15 greatest coaches of all time, but I feel like he really didn't start getting more recognition until recent years. I mean, even when he coached LeBron, D-Wade, the Big Three Heat to 2 titles, he didn't get much credit for it. But in recent years, he's brought some Heat rosters deep into the playoffs, even if it doesn't seem like this team should have the talent to make it this far. The fact is, Spo is amazing at adapting and always putting his players into the best position to succeed. And what makes him special is how he's able to utilize his role players to their fullest potential. Take Duncan Robinson, for example. He had the worst season since his rookie year, and he was almost exclusively a spot-up shooter this year. But in the playoffs, with Tyler Hero's injury, he's gotten way more minutes. And he's thrived in those minutes. Instead of being relegated to a spot-up shooter, Robinson is cutting to the basket a lot more. It gives the defense another guy to pay attention to, because normally Robinson is either standing in the corner or coming off a screen. But because he's cutting and moving around a lot more, he's a threat to score even without the ball, and he puts more pressure on the defense to guard him. This is a great adjustment because it takes advantage of Bam Adebayo's most valuable yet underrated skill, his passing. Now, obviously, he's not on Jokic levels of passing, but he's a top 5 passing center in the league right now. He can and he will hit you with these passes at the perfect time. By putting Bam further away from the basket, it pulls out the opposing team's big men. Brook Lopez, Mitchell Robinson, and Al Horford or Robert Williams, they're all incredibly good defensive bigs. So by putting Bam further away from the basket, it drags them out to the perimeter and it prevents them from contesting shots at the rim. This was especially apparent in the Bucks series. Lopez finished as the runner-up to the Defensive Player of the Year voting, yet Spo putting Bam in the point forward role essentially neutralized his defense. It allowed the Heat guards to penetrate the paint without worrying about Brook lurking there. With Bam's passing ability and decent mid-range shot, he shot 50% from 10 to 16 feet this season, it forces those bigs to guard him out there. And as a result, it opens up the floor so much. And when the defense has to collapse, the Heat shooters are open. Not only that, but he sees the floor in all situations, and I know he's had some bad games in terms of scoring, but Bam is just so valuable offensively and a lot of the stuff you won't see unless you really pay attention. At the end of the 2022-23 regular season, NBA GMs across the league were given a survey to rank the best coaches in the NBA. 52% of responding executives voted Spoelstra as the best coach in the league, second best at in-game adjustments, third best at managing and motivating the players, and the coach with the best defensive schemes. Not bad for a guy who never won Coach of the Year. Speaking of defensive schemes, the Miami Heat have made a name for themselves for running zone defense way more often than the average team, and I'd say they're the only team who can run the zone effectively. And sometimes, the way they run their zone defense is interesting. For example, take a look at some of these plays here against the Knicks. It's almost like they're running a 1-1-3 zone, as opposed to the usual 2-3 zone. The reason they run it like this is so that, in case there's a screen, they can switch immediately without losing a step. Though normally they're running their usual 2-3 zone, and they whip it out now and again just to give the opposing team a different look. Because Miami has basically been the smallest team throughout the entire playoffs, zone can help cover for their lack of length and height. Whenever an opposing player tries to drive to the rim, you can see the other defenders moving in quickly to challenge them. It takes a team effort to stop drives, especially when you're undersized and can't contest every shot at the basket. The Heat's undersized lineup all have quick hands and feet, so playing a zone allows them to maximize their defensive strengths and minimize their weaknesses. They got some dogs on this roster, a bunch of gritty defenders who might not have the size, but certainly the foot speed and quickness to recover and contest, which is why they can play zone. It doesn't always work though. The biggest weak spots when playing a zone is the middle area of the floor, or as Joe Mazzulla said, just shoot over them. When you're not playing man-to-man, sometimes you won't see a hand contesting your shot. Sometimes guys aren't sticking to you. It takes a while for players to get adjusted to scoring against the zone, but when they do, the Heat can switch it up and go back to sticking to their man. That's the whole point, to give their opponents a different look down the floor every time, and the plan has been working. Though I don't think it's gonna work against Denver's offense. The teams they faced this year had rather predictable offenses, whereas the Nuggets? I'm not sure if a zone could work against them. But it's the Heat after all, so we'll see. It's been a common headline during the Heat's entire playoff run. It's all of their undrafted guys. Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin, Max Strus, and Gabe Vincent were all undrafted and getting significant playing time. They almost stole Game 6 against the Celtics, even with Butler and Adebayo having their two worst games of the playoffs. But the most important thing to realize here is, all of these four undrafted guys I just mentioned, they all developed in Miami into the players they are today. It says a lot about not just their coaching staff, but their training and player development too. The Heat have always had this reputation for taking some random dude nobody's ever heard of and turning them into an NBA caliber player, basically like the Spurs of the East. The most impressive guy has been Caleb Martin. Remember, just a year ago, in Game 7 when the Heat lost against the Celtics, Martin got a DNP. The team did not even trust him enough to play him in that final game. This year, he was Miami's most valuable player. He got 4 of the 9 votes for the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, but I feel like he should have won it. In the series, he averaged over 19 points a game on ridiculous efficiency, and that's basically more than double his regular season average. I mean, at times he looked like Kobe out there. Martin was the X factor, the Heat's most consistent scorer, and when they needed him most, he showed up. While Jimmy Butler rightfully gets the recognition for carrying the Heat past the Bucks, and the whole playoff Jimmy moniker is a real thing, but since that first round ended, it's been a total team effort. Everyone, even Gabe Vincent, who was quite mediocre for most of the regular season, has stepped up big time as the permanent starting point guard. And he might not be an all-star, but he certainly plays like he thinks he is. The added aggression of Vincent and Martin has generated more open looks for the rest of this team, and the results speak for themselves. The Heat's 34.4% three-point shooting in the regular season was the 4th worst in the NBA. But in the playoffs, they're number 1 among all playoff teams in three-point percentage at nearly 40%. It's such a crazy turnaround. Their biggest weakness turned into their biggest strength. In the regular season, Vincent and Martin were struggling to even get into the paint, but now their confidence is at an all-time high, and the rest of their team has benefited from that. Whether or not this Miami Heat team wins the title, this has been a highly successful season. The players don't think like this though. They want to win the title, especially Jimmy. Don't forget, they were in the finals a few years ago. It would be nice to see them do it, but I just don't know. Being up against the Nuggets? They've lost 9 of their last 10 games against them. In recent history, the Nuggets have owned them. Then again, I'm never gonna bet against this Heat team. In every series, the doubts were very loud and clear, but they rose above that. Against the Bucks? Oh, they got so much more talent, a proven championship roster. And even with Giannis down, they should still win, right? Well, wrong. Against the Knicks, oh, they're too big. They're the best rebounding team in the league, while the Heat are just too small. They can't handle them on the glass. Against the Celtics, oh, they're so long, their defense is insane, the most well-rounded roster from top to bottom, the Heat will have such a hard time scoring. We heard all of that, but the Heat proved them wrong time and time again. That's why I'm hesitant to say they'll just get destroyed by the Nuggets. You never know what's gonna happen with this Heat squad. Anyway, that's all folks. Thank you all so much for watching, and let me know your thoughts on the Miami Heat's run this year. How do you see them doing against the Denver Nuggets? I feel like all the predictions, all the odds are heavily favoring Denver. But then again, that was the same case against Boston and Milwaukee. Can you see the Heat going all the way? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.